As pretty much most of you guys know, I love Amphibia. Even after all this time since I last watched it, it is still my favorite Disney cartoon to ever air. That said, if you were to ask me what my second favorite Disney cartoon is right now, I'd surprisingly say The Ghost in Molly McGee. Even though these shows have rather different premises, they do share some interesting similarities. Both feature Thai American protagonists and a non human friend. Together, they changed each other for the better and the world around them. But by far, the biggest similarity between them is how they ended. Both duos go their separate ways as they acknowledge that they can't stay in their own respective settings together. Now, most people that I've seen do like this kind of ending, especially for these shows as it fitted their themes. But which show did this bittersweet ending better? Now, I presume most of you will say Amphibia had the better ending, and it would be ridiculous to compare the two. If you were referring to the finales as a whole, then yeah, I agree that Amphibia had a better finale than Molly McGee. The hardest thing was a longer episode than the end. There were more beautifully animated scenes in Amphibia, and it wrapped up more character arcs. Not to mention, but Amphibia also had the balls to actually go for the ultimate tearjerker of killing off its main character. Yeah, I know it's only a temporary loss, but even then, that loss had permanent consequences compared to deaths and memory losses that we saw in other shows. But by far, what made the hardest thing the better finale is how it ended a more complete story, given that Amphibia had a full season 3, whereas Molly McGee got their third season cancelled. Although that is more of a criticism towards Disney than the creators themselves. So without a doubt, Amphibia's series finale is the better one that stuck with my mind more. But when it comes to comparing their common trope of separating two best friends for good, it's not as simple as you might think. Sure, most of you will likely say that Amphibia did the trope better because Anne and Sprig were just the duo. They had so much time together, growing and learning, and had a lot of earth-shattering experiences, quite literally in a way. The show was built upon these two characters meeting each other, and their dynamic was supposed to be the example of how a friendship should look like. On top of that, Anne not only had to say goodbye to Sprig, but also to Hop Hop, Polly, and everyone in Amphibia with a near 0% chance of ever seeing them again. At least with Molly and Scratch's goodbye, we know they can and likely will cross paths again when Scratch dies and becomes a ghost again. That said, there is one thing that the Ghost in Molly McGee did better than Amphibia when it comes to executing this trope. Unlike Anne and Sprig, Molly and Scratch chose to go their separate ways. Sure, you can technically say that with Anne and Sprig as well, and Sasha and Marcy could have stayed in Amphibia forever, even after finding out they only have enough energy to open one last portal home. But of course, Anne, Sasha, and Marcy have a life on Earth, so they have to return home, leaving Amphibia behind forever. As much as I do appreciate the writing of these last scenes, what always troubled me about the ending of Amphibia is that it could have turned out differently to where the trio didn't have to leave the world forever. You see, when you narrow it down, the main reason why Anne, Sasha, and Marcy had to leave their found families was because of this character, the Guardians of the Stones, or who I like to call Omega Domino. I don't know about you guys, but I've always had mixed feelings about this character. While they do have a decent personality with some humility, and they do explain why the Calamity Stones existed, I never like how they seem to only exist just as a plot device. They are the reason why the stones exist to begin with, which allowed the Newtopians to conquer other worlds, which in turn caused the stones to head to Earth, and allow Anne, Sasha, and Marcy to go to Amphibia, thus starting the story that we saw. Not only that, but it was Omega Domino's choice to give Anne and her friends only enough energy to do one last trip back to Earth. In a way, they are the root reason why everything we saw in Amphibia happened, from the moment they created the stones, thousands of years before the start of the main plot, to the very end of the story. What that implies though, is they essentially forced Anne to say goodbye to Sprig, the planters, and everyone else. Even though Omega Domino could have easily given her more energy to at least let her see them again on rare occasions. What's weird is that Omega Domino knows that Anne can be trusted with the power of those stones, considering what she has done with them. So they didn't have to limit that energy to her. My point is that Anne's goodbye to Sprig and everyone in Amphibia, while it was executed very well emotionally, it did feel forced from a plot perspective. And this was something that I didn't really notice until I watched The Ghost in Molly McGee and how it handled the same trope. Unlike Anne's goodbye with Sprig, Molly's goodbye with Scratch felt more deserving in a way. There was no external force from a Deus Ex Machina character that forced Molly and Scratch into a position where they had to make a choice of going their separate ways or not. Instead, they arrived at this point because of the choices that they made previously. Specifically, Scratch's choice of accidentally possessing Todd and getting a rush of memories, thus allowing him to remember everything about his past life. Now, you could say that it felt random for Scratch to accidentally possess the right body to unlock those memories, but bear in mind, he did that because he chose to go through with his plan to possess bodies for funnel cakes, which makes the circumstances feel less random, because that is part of his character. On top of that, when Molly and Scratch did reach this point, they could have easily chosen to stay together. I mean, Scratch himself did want to continue his status quo of being a ghost who was always there for Molly, and she herself would definitely want that too. Both of them at this point have enjoyed their time together, and there's not much they can lose by continuing this. But despite the benefits of keeping the status quo, and the high risk there is for both of them if Scratch chose to come back to life, Molly and Scratch chose to go for the path of going their separate ways because it was simply the right thing to do. Scratch/Todd deserved to live a life where he enjoyed it at its fullest. And the whole point of this story is to show that people should live out their lives and take risks to make it worth living. Molly and Scratch not only acknowledged this lesson, but also embraced it on their own despite having good reasons to ignore it. My point is that what I appreciated from Molly McGee is how the goodbye between the two main characters felt more organic than Amphibia with its main characters. Anne and Sprig had to separate because it was the seemingly more practical choice to make given the circumstances that a god essentially forced upon them. With Molly and Scratch though, their choice to separate was mainly the result of the growth they had together, after learning what it means to be alive. Now, just to reiterate, I still think Amphibia had a better finale overall for the reasons I previously mentioned, like the longer runtime, the animation, the multitude of emotional scenes, and so on. But when it comes to the writing of how the main characters acknowledge the main morals of their story, and the reasons for why the characters separate, I do believe the Ghost in Molly McGee just did it better. There's maybe one small thing the show did better, but it was this one thing that made me really appreciate this finale as much as I did, and make it one of my favorite cartoon finales yet from Disney. All of this is to say that Amphibia and Molly McGee had phenomenal finales that were satisfying conclusions to their phenomenal stories. It just goes to illustrate that silly shows like these really do have a lot more meaning than what most people expect. That is why I say they are underrated, and why they are my two favorite Disney cartoons ever made.
Spran against the world.
Spran against the world.
Dream Team? You and me?
For all eternity.
But hey, those are just my thoughts on Amphibia and The Ghost in Molly McGee. Your thoughts on these shows may be different from mine. If that's the case, feel free to express them in the comments below. And please give this video a like, and subscribe for more content like this. With all that said, thank you all for watching me ramble. I hope you all have a great day. See you in the next one.